And today marks 1 year since President Barack Obama declared historic change in relations with Cuba. Since then, we've seen embassies open and travel to Cuba by U.S. citizens increase sharply. Senior political analyst Michael Putney is in the newsroom with a look at what's been achieved and what lies ahead.
And Constance, what lies ahead for U.S.-Cuba relations is frankly pretty murky. Big issues remain to be worked out, the biggest being Cuba's human rights abuses.
The crackdown on pro-democracy activists in Cuba has increased dramatically in the last year. More than 7,000 incidents, according to a human rights group in Cuba.
Acts of repression by the Castro government, crackdowns on pro-democracy activists have increased in the last year. Are you talking about that?
We have started a human rights dialogue also with Cuban authorities. We've had one meeting. We're planning to have another, and we will, of course, continue to speak out on those issues.
De Laurentiis is the top American diplomat in Cuba now. He emphasizes the positive side of the historic change.
Mail service. We've signed 2 environmental agreements. We're working on a civil aviation accord. We're working on expanding our counter-narcotics operations.
Yesterday, Washington and Havana announced agreement on resuming commercial air flights. Working out the details will take several months.
Neither the American nor Cuban people are well served by a rigid policy that's rooted in events that took place before most of us were born.
Exactly 1 year ago today, President Obama announced the new policy toward Cuba, saying more than half a century of isolation had not worked. Miami's Cuban-American members of Congress are skeptical. Mario Diaz-Balart says, sadly, the president's decision to coddle brutal dictators rather than embrace the people they oppress has had dismal consequences.
Just a few minutes ago, the White House released a statement from the president on this 1-year anniversary of the historic change. The president said today more Americans are visiting Cuba and engaging the Cuban people than at any time in the last 50 years. We continue to have differences with the Cuban government, but we raise those issues directly, and we will always stand for human rights. The president says he would still like to visit Cuba before his term ends next year, but he wants to see good progress on human rights first. We're in the newsroom today. Michael Putney, Local 10 News.